Welcome to another episode of the Podcast Therapist. I'm your host, the Shan Man, radio broadcaster, podcaster, and podcast producer. And of course, you're probably wondering, where's all the pomp and circumstance to today's episode? Where's the intro? All that stuff that I like to add into my podcast. Well, it's not always necessary for your podcast, but I believe that a sound brand does really help people recognize your podcast. And if it's not your voice, it would be your sound brand, the sound design. I think that is something that is very important. But the real reason why you're not hearing any of that stuff today, and I'll just give you the short version right now, is that on Friday, I dropped an external hard drive and I was not able to recover it up until Saturday. And so that recovery process is happening right now. The little bit longer version is that as I was heading into work on Friday night, I pulled my bag out of my car. And the bag, of course, had shifted somehow in travel. And when I pulled out the bag, the external hard drive was not secure enough in the bag when I packed it that it fell out about a foot from the ground and hit the ground. And I thought, it's no big deal. It'll be all right. It was just a small, it was just a small impact. It wasn't going to make a big difference. But when I got up into the radio station, I set up shop for the night. I plugged in the hard drive and it was not being recognized by my Mac. And in fact, it just started to not mount at all. And so the thing is with this information is that it is all the information that I use to create my podcast. It is all the information that I use to create those elements of my podcast. And I guess this is a really good lesson for me, and it would be a good lesson for you, is that if you are working with an external hard drive, make sure that you are doing a backup of the external hard drive of all of your audio files. This has really kind of limited me over the weekend. I've not been able to do anything that I wanted to do over the weekend. I got the hard drive over to my buddy Tracy on Saturday afternoon, and he was able to start transferring the data from the old hard drive into the new hard drive. Now, I've heard people tell me like, just take the cover off and you'll be able to switch out the case and it'll be fine. Throw it in the freezer. That's all it really needs. And so for me, it's more about the content that I don't want to lose. That is years of content that I have built and refined and perfected over the years. It's not necessarily something that I think would really, I don't know. I'm not too worried about that because I think the most important thing is that I'm alive and it wasn't a major accident of any form. But I think I wasn't too worried about gathering that data because I have already gone through the processes of learning how to use all of these digital audio workstations, Photoshop, Illustrator, you name it, and I can always recreate it. So if there's a lesson that I do want to share with you, and I've talked about this in the past in previous episodes, is that it's important to build skills and learn skills. The beginning part of building out your podcast, or maybe you're in the middle part of your podcast, I think the important thing is to understand that you have to build out skills. Building skills is going to expedite that process. If you happen to lose a hard drive or you happen to lose something of the nature that is going to make you recreate it, life happens, right? Life happens all the time. And you're going to have to figure out how to recreate at some point in time. That is why I encourage you and always want you to build new skills. Build new skill sets so that whenever the time does come, whether you have to build it for yourself or build it for someone else, you can do it in a much faster time than when you were first starting. So I don't know if there's advice there advice I can give you right now is that in the beginning, you have to give yourself patience to learn those processes. But once you've learned those processes, then you're able to capitalize on them later on down the line. One of my clients has to release a podcast coming up in a week, and I got the files today, which is Monday, March 1st. So yesterday, as of the release of this recording. And the good thing is that I already know the processes in my head of what I was using in Adobe Audition to recreate the podcast. It might have taken me just a little extra time just to build out what I need to build out from scratch again, but I'm able to utilize those skills to create that podcast and still deliver it to him on time. The other thing that I think we should also really pay attention to is that when something like this happens, it could be catastrophic to your life. You lose all the data, you lose everything, you lose all your audio files, you lose everything. And I think if there's one lesson that I would like to impart to you is that when something like this happens, allow yourself the break. I know that I always talk about and I preach about the consistency aspect of podcasting, especially for YouTube. Like this podcast, I'm going to release it as is today. I don't know how long it's going to be, honestly. But what I do know is that I'm releasing it to give you an update as to what has happened and why I'm not doing it. Or why I'm not giving you, like, I guess, an episode that is really more meat worthy. Because I do have some stuff that I want to talk about and that is on my hard drive. But do I go and re-record it or do I save it? I don't know. We'll see what happens. But what I will tell you is that it is okay to take a break. It is completely okay to take a break from building your content. It's okay to sit back and just take time for yourself. This weekend, I found myself, really more involved in my exercise than anything else. This weekend I did yoga, I went for a walk, but I did not think about the podcast. I did not think about what I was going to create because I'm always thinking about it. And you probably are always thinking about building your podcast too. So when the time comes and allows you to give yourself a break, give yourself a break. I just bought this brand new audiobook today. It was called Backable. It is by Sunil Gupta. And in that book, Sunil starts talking about what it takes to be a backable human being, how someone can back you, how they can buy into who you are. And he shared this story in the book. It's in the very beginning part of the book. And he shares a story about how there was this restaurant that burned down. And they were going to lose all this money and this revenue from the fact that they were not going to be able to open up and conduct business. The owner himself had to end up paying out his employees while he was doing the renovations to his brand new rebuilt restaurant. But as time was going on, he was losing his money. He was probably going to have to shut down. And people within the restaurant community from all parts of the world started helping him out. It's not necessarily the idea of people helping out as it is the story about how the time spent when he was out of commission while the renovations were happening, it was the time spent where he could sit down, not just relax, but reconfigure his restaurant's menu and say, all right, I'm taking this time to reconfigure what is going to be on the menu. And when he opened back up, his business started really resonating with more people. And he decided that he would go ahead and do something like this every single, I can't remember how many months it was, but he would go ahead and he would close the restaurant so that he could recalibrate what his menu looks like. So what am I saying to you? Sometimes it is okay to take a break. If something catastrophic ends up happening, you lose a hard drive, your house burns down, God forbid your house burns down, but something happens, you get a flat tire, you're not able to meet your deadline for your podcast. That is something that is very important for you. It's okay to take time back or time away and recalibrate, not only for your own personal and mental health, but also maybe within your podcast or your business. That book is called Backable. I promise that this is not something that I was going to promote in this podcast, but I did start listening to it. Sunil Gupta, he's actually the brother of Sanjay Gupta, who is the medical correspondent on CNN. So I thought this is very interesting because, Sanjay is wildly successful in the medical field, but Sunil, he was in that whole Silicon Valley environment. He helped out with Groupon. He interviewed with Jack Dorsey from Twitter. I mean, he's been the rounds. This is a really good book that I think that you should give a listen to. I'm going to leave a link for that down in the description of this particular podcast show note. So if you're on your app right now, you can go ahead and scroll down and you can see that there is an affiliate link for that book down below. Listen to it either on Audible or you can just get the hardcover. And right now, it's actually a very good book. And it's called Backable, The Surprising Truth Behind What Makes People Take a Chance on You. I mean, it really could apply to you and your podcast. So that is a story behind me and my my hard drive. It is currently being backed up again by my friend Tracy. I will be back definitely next week with a brand new full episode of the Podcast Therapist. So just be aware of that. But really, take some time away if you need to recalibrate your podcast or your business. One last thought that I'll leave you on this, and it's just something that had come up. This last weekend, not only did I focus on getting some sun and exercise, but I did find out that there were some other opportunities on my YouTube channel that I could start incorporating within my business and my podcast. So when you're on this downtime and you have this downtime, don't look at it as something, again, catastrophic. Look at it as something where you have an opportunity to recalibrate and incorporate something new. I hope this helps out. Again, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Podcast Therapist. Sorry, it is a short one today. I know, but I'm sure you guys are happy with the short one, but I do respect your time for listening, and I know that it is a time commitment to listen to me on this podcast when I share out my own thoughts about podcasting. But again, I appreciate you very much. If you have questions about anything that has to relate with your podcast, I highly encourage you to reach out to me at thepodcasttherapist.com. You can shoot me an email or you can shoot me a voicemail. It's all right there in the contact me section of the page, and I will get back to you and possibly even answer it in an upcoming episode. So in the meantime, thank you so much for listening to this very dry and non-produced podcast episode, and I'll be talking to you next week. Take care.